texts of the White Yajurveda by Jasanmaya Samhita, translated by Ralph P.H. Griffith, 1899, Preface. The Yajurveda derived from the roots Yaj to sacrifice or worship, and Vid to know, is the knowledge of sacrifice or sacrificial texts and formulas, as distinguished from the Rigveda, or knowledge of recited praise, the Samaveda, or knowledge of chanted hymns, the Atharva, or Brahma Veda, which is the knowledge of prayer, charm, and spells, though ranking second in the Indian enumeration of the Vedas and containing much that is of very ancient origin, its compilation in its present form exhibiting as it does the almost complete development of castes and mixed castes, and considerable advance in arts and sciences, trades, handicrafts, and occupations, is evidently of later date than that even of the Atharva. Well, now we know that the idea of the caste system, as in, we got a priestly caste, and we have a warrior or ruling caste, and we have merchant caste, and we have a lowly work sort of caste. That's been going on probably a good 10,000 years or more before what we have listed here. Haven't people heard of Ketohayuk or that whole series of that one type of temple where you obviously had society stratified in that degree? The Samhita are a collection of its hymns, texts, and formulas, constituting the hymn book and prayer book of the Avaryu priest, as distinguished from the Hotar, the Udgatar, and the Brahmin, the special priests, respectively, of the three other Vedas, owes its origin to the increasing multiformity and complication of the Indian ritual and the recognized insufficiency of the simple and unsystematically arranged collection of Rigveda hymns to meet the requirements of the performers of various essentially important rites and ceremonies. Well, sometimes you need a pathwork and go through things in order. The Yajurveda, owing to a schism among its earliest teachers and their followers, was divided into two distinct Samhitas, or collections called probably from the names of the rishis or inspired seers, who are respectively their reputed compilers. The Ta'it Teriya and the Vajrasaneya are. The Vajrasaneya, the former and older, being known also by the title of Krishna, or black, probably from its dark or obscure appearance. The collection of sacrificial texts and formulas being perplexingly intermingled with the Brahmana, or exegetical portion, which explains them and teaches their ritual application, and the latter being called Sukla, or white. The revised, systematic, and clear collection, containing the texts and formulas by themselves with a totally distinct Brahmana, the Satapatha, as an appendix, in the two divisions besides these essential points of difference, are found occasional verbal and orthoepic variations, which are generally of little importance. The order of rites and ceremonies is substantially identical, but the white contains a few more texts than the black. The Samhita of the White Yajurveda consists of 40 adhyayas, or books, containing, with frequent repetitions of the same text, about 2,000 verses. A large portion of these are vrichas, or strophes borrowed, frequently with variations from the Rigveda and sometimes from the Atharva. These, of course, are metrical. Nearly equal in quantity are the juice texts, or sacrificial formulas, the most characteristic portion from which the Veda derives its name, composed in measured prose which rises now and then, as Professor Weber observes, to a true rhythmical swing, and long passages, such as the lists of victims to be tied up and dedicated at the Ashvamedha and the Purushamedha, which are necessarily in the simplest prose. For further information with regard to this Veda, the reader should consult Professor Weber's History of Indian Literature, English translation by John Mann and Theodore Zechariah, Trubner's Oriental Series, Professor Max Muller, History of Ancient Sanskrit Literature, Professor J. Egeling's Introduction, Volume 12 of the Sacred Books of the East, R. For a briefer account, Mrs. Manning's Ancient and Medieval India, Volume 1, page 107 to 109. Obviously, there's so many things I could share and talk about on this channel. My translation follows the fine edition of the White Yajurveda, or Vajasaneya Samhita, and the two recensions, the Mad Yandina and the Kanva with Mahidhara's commentary, the Veda Deepa, or Lamp of Knowledge, written towards the close of the 16th century, the Common Era, and published under the patronage of the Honorable Court of Directors of the East India Company in 1849 at Berlin by Dr. Albrecht Weber, at that time docent of the Sanskrit language at University Docent, is that we call it Docent? This excellent edition, consisting of 3 parts, the latter 2 of which contain the Satapatha Brahmana in the Madhyandina recension, with extracts from the commentaries of Sayana, Haris Vaman, and Deviv Edaganga, and the Srautra Sutra of Katyayana, which extracts from the commentaries of Karka and Yajna Kadeva, has not been reprinted and is now practically unattainable. In India, the text of the Madhyandina recension with Mahidhara's commentary has been issued in a cheap form at Calcutta by Pandit Jibananda Vidya Sagara, B.A. Superintendent of the Free Sanskrit College, of which a second edition appeared in 1892, and a lithographed edition of the text with a Hindi translation of Mahidhara's commentary was published in 1874 at Besma in the northwestern provinces by Raja Givra Prasa Davarman of that place. A cheap edition of the text in unbounded manuscript form has been published at Bombay. And of course, these 4 that is proper, or could have been 7 at one point. I believe one that is thought to have been one of those Vedas has been discovered. I don't remember what it's called or how to find this 5th Veda, but yeah, it was thought that, people weren't supposed to hear this. The marching class and the farming and work, the poor class, they weren't allowed to hear this. So, this was obviously things were changing in the 1800s. And interestingly enough, the 1600s and the 1500s was a time when stuff was put forward as far as religious text available to the West and translations in their own language that kind of started. No separate translation of the whole Samhita, or collection of texts and formulas, has appeared in any European language. It was Professor Weber's intention, as signified in his History of Indian Literature, to bring out a translation giving the ceremonial belonging to each verse, together with a full glossary, but this promise has not been fulfilled, owing to the pressure of other labors. This scholar had previously published a Latin translation with annotations in the same language of Adhyayas 9 and 10 in his Vajrasamneya Samhita specimen, Breslau, 1846, and more recently a German version of Adhyaya 16 in Indische 2, page 14, and of the list of men and women to be dedicated at the Purushametta in his treatise on human sacrifice among Indians of the Vedic age, printed in his Indische 1, page 76 to 84 of Adhyaya 40. As in Upanishad, there are several translations into English. However, nearly the whole of the first 18 Adhyayas has been incorporated, dissected, and explained clause by clause in the first 9 books of the Satapatha Brahmana, and an admirable translation of this vast work by Professor Julius Eckerling is now nearly completed in the Sacred Books of the East, 4 volumes, volume 12, 26, 41, and 43, that series, having already appeared, and the concluding volume, volume 45, being in the press. From this translation, which, but for its bulk and costliness, would make half of my work superfluous, and from Professor Egling's annotations, I derive the greatest assistance and most gratefully record my obligations. Now, I tend to throw in my own comment, probably at the end, depending on how long the Adhyayas are, right? All that I have attempted to do is to give a faithful translation to the best of my ability of the texts and sacrificial formulas of the Veda, with just sufficient commentary, chiefly from Mahibara, to make them intelligible. Much additional information may be found in Professor A. Hillebrand's Ritual Literatur Vedische Opfer and Zauber, Grundrisse der Indo-Arischen Philologie and Altertumskunde, Strasbourg, 1897, and further minute details of the various sacrifices, rites, and ceremonies are given in the Satapatha Brahmana, as already mentioned, and in various articles referred to in my notes by Professor A. Weber, the great authority on the Yajurveda and all that is connected with it, R.T.H. Griffith, Kotagiri, Nilgiris, May 1899. And so some days I may end up recording 5 Adhyayas. Some days it's going to be difficult for one because it's going to take over an hour to read a couple of the ones at the end, right? So the treatise on human sacrifice among the Indians, the Vedic age, is that what we're talking about here? Ritual text of the Veda regarding sacrifice and something. Zauber, what's Zauber mean?